Tom had always dreamed of a small, peaceful place away from the city. After saving for many years, he finally bought a small wooden cabin near Pinewood Lake. The cabin was simple but strong, surrounded by tall trees, soft grass, and the calm sound of water. It was not fancy, but it was his favorite place in the world. Whenever life in the city became too loud or stressful, he would drive to the cabin, light a fire, and rest. The narrow dirt road that led to his cabin was his only way in and out. It passed through an open field and a few empty plots before it reached his land. For years, no one had ever stopped him from using it. The cabin stood alone near the trees, and Tom liked it that way. One bright morning, he packed his tools and some food and began his usual trip to the cabin. The sun was shining through the pine branches, and the road looked the same at first. But when he turned near the bend, he stopped the truck suddenly. His eyes widened in shock. A tall wall of metal now stood right across the road. The top of the wall had sharp spikes that glinted in the sunlight. It looked more like a prison barrier than a simple fence. Tom got out of his truck and walked closer. A large sign hung on the gate in bold red letters. It read, "Private Property. Entry forbidden by Pinewood Lake HOA." He stood there for a moment, confused. He looked around to make sure he was on the right path. He had driven the same way for years. The land beyond the gate was his property, yet someone had built a wall blocking it. A man in a yellow vest appeared from the other side of the fence. He was carrying a clipboard and wore dark glasses. "Hey," Tom called out. "What is this? I need to get through." "My cabin is right there." The man stopped and looked at him without emotion. "You cannot pass," he said. "This area is now part of the HOA property. New security rule?" "That cannot be right," Tom replied. "This road belongs to me." "It leads to my land," the man shrugged. "Talk to the HOA board if you have a problem. I just follow orders." Before Tom could say another word, the man walked away. The metal gate stood between him and his home. Tom walked along the side of the wall, searching for a way around it, but it stretched across the entire width of the road. The spikes made it dangerous to climb, and there was no small gap anywhere. He looked at the sign again, then turned back toward his truck. His hands were shaking with frustration. He drove around through the forest for an hour, trying to find another path to the cabin, but the trees were thick and the ground was uneven. There was no way for his truck to pass. After some time, he gave up and returned home. That night, Tom sat at his table, thinking. The HOA had no authority over his land. He had never joined it, and his cabin stood outside the neighborhood. So how could they block his road? The next morning, he went to the HOA office. The building was modern, with clean glass doors and white walls. Inside, there were smiling staff members, but their smiles looked forced. He walked to the front desk and spoke politely. "I need to speak with someone about a wall that was built near Pinewood Lake," he said. "It blocks the only road to my cabin." The woman behind the desk typed on her computer and replied, "That area has been included in the Pinewood HOA community plan. All access must now be approved by the board." Tom frowned. "But I own that land. The road is mine." "You cannot block it." The woman gave a practiced smile. "If you believe there has been an error, you can file a complaint in writing. The board will review it." Tom filled out the form she gave him. It was long and full of confusing words, but he completed it. When he tried to ask more questions, she just pointed at a box labeled "Complaints" and said, "You can drop it there." He left the office feeling helpless but determined. Days turned into weeks and he received no answer. He called the office several times, but the staff always said, "Your case is still under review." One afternoon, he returned to the site of the wall. He found a new letter attached to the gate. It said the road had been declared a security zone under HOA management, and no one without written approval could pass. Tom read the letter again and again. The words felt like a slap. His property was being stolen piece by piece. He folded the paper and placed it carefully in his pocket. He took several photos of the wall and the signs. Back at home, he decided to stop waiting for the HOA's reply. He opened his old laptop, searched for maps and land ownership records, and began reading. The internet was slow, but he stayed up late. He looked through property lines, county maps, and ownership documents. Finally, he found proof. The road leading to his cabin was drawn clearly inside his boundary lines. It was officially registered under his name. Tom felt a sense of relief, but also anger. They had blocked his legal property. He printed the documents and made copies. The next morning, he called a local attorney named Greg. Greg was known for helping small landowners who faced unfair treatment. When Tom arrived at his office, Greg welcomed him with a handshake. "What brings you in today?" Greg asked. Tom explained everything, showing the photos, letters, and documents. Greg read them carefully and nodded slowly. "They cannot do this," Greg said. "If your papers are correct, the HOA built that wall on your land. That is illegal. So what can I do?" Tom asked. Greg leaned back in his chair. "We can start by sending them a notice to remove the wall. If they refuse, we file a lawsuit. You will need patience, but the law is on your side." Tom agreed. He had worked too hard for his cabin to lose it to unfair rules. He signed the necessary papers and left the office feeling stronger. That evening, he drove again to the gate and looked at the tall wall. He no longer felt powerless. Instead, he felt ready. A week later, Greg sent the HOA an official notice demanding they remove the wall and pay for damages. The HOA board did not respond. Instead, they added more warning signs around the gate. It made Tom even more determined. Greg filed the lawsuit in county court. The case was titled Thomas v. Pinewood Lake Homeowners Association. When the papers were delivered to the HOA office, people inside looked shocked. They had not expected resistance. Tom spent hours gathering more proof. He found older maps showing the road existed long before the HOA was formed. He talked to neighbors who had used it in the past. Every detail strengthened his case. As the days passed, local residents started talking about the strange conflict between one man and the powerful HOA. Some thought Tom would lose, but others quietly supported him. They admired his courage to stand up against unfair control. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Tom parked near the wall and looked at it one more time. The spikes still glinted and the sign still warned trespassers to stay away, but he no longer felt afraid or angry. He felt sure of one thing: that wall would come down and justice would rise in its place. The news about Tom's case spread quietly through Pinewood Lake. Most people in the town had heard stories about the HOA and its strict rules. Some residents had been fined for small things like planting the wrong color of flowers or leaving a bicycle on the porch. Many people disliked the board members but feared speaking against them. When they heard that Tom had filed a lawsuit, some felt a small spark of hope. Tom, however, did not think about fame or attention. He only wanted to reach his cabin again. Every time he looked at the pictures of the spiked wall, he felt a mix of sadness and determination. That little cabin had been his peaceful escape from the world. Now it was locked away by people who had no right to touch it. His lawyer, Greg, met him every few days. Together, they built a strong case. They collected copies of old land records, aerial photos, and the official county map that proved the road was part of Tom's land. Greg also found that the HOA had never applied for permission to build that metal wall. It was illegal construction. One morning, Tom received a thick envelope at his door. It was the official court notice confirming the first hearing date. The case would be heard in 3 weeks. Tom read it carefully. He had never been inside a courtroom before, and the thought made him nervous, but he trusted Greg. During the following days, Tom continued gathering evidence. He met an older man named Henry who lived near the lake. Henry remembered when the road was first built. He told Tom that his father had used it to deliver wood to the old cabins many years ago. "That road was there before any of those HOA people moved in," Henry said. "You should not let them take it." Henry even gave a written statement which became a helpful piece of evidence. Meanwhile, the HOA board held their own meetings. Their president, a woman named Linda, was known for being strict and proud. She believed the HOA had full authority over anything near Pinewood Lake. When she received the court papers, she called an emergency meeting. Inside the meeting room, several board members sat around a long table. Linda stood at the front holding the lawsuit document. "This man, Tom, claims we blocked his land," she said. "He is trying to take us to court. We cannot allow him to win. If he does, others will follow." One of the members, a tall man named Mark, spoke quietly. "But did we check the property line before building the wall?" Linda frowned. The road was open and unused. It looked like common land. "We acted to secure the area. He can use another route." "But what if the documents prove it is his?" Mark asked again. Linda's face tightened. "Then we will fight it." The HOA does not back down. Tom did not know about their meeting, but he felt the board's resistance through their actions. A few days later, new guards were placed near the gate. They carried clipboards and watched anyone who came close. The HOA also sent Tom a letter accusing him of damaging their reputation by filing the lawsuit. Greg read the letter and smiled slightly. They are worried. That is a good sign. It means they know they made a mistake. The first court hearing arrived on a bright Monday morning. Tom wore a plain shirt and stood beside Greg inside the courtroom. The judge, a calm middle-aged man, looked over the papers. On the other side, Linda and two other board members sat with their lawyer. They avoided Tom's eyes. Greg began by showing the property records and maps. He explained clearly how the access road was part of Tom's land and how the HOA had built the wall without legal permission. When it was the HOA's turn, their lawyer argued that the road was part of the community zone and that the HOA had secured it for safety reasons. However, when the judge asked for the official permission document for the wall, the lawyer hesitated. He had none. The judge noted it down and scheduled a second hearing for further review. Tom left the courtroom feeling lighter. It was only the first step, but he knew the truth was on his side. During the next few weeks, Tom's story began to attract more attention. A local newspaper printed an article about his fight against the HOA. The title read, "Local Man Battles HOA for His Cabin Road." Many residents who had suffered from the HOA's unfair rules began to contact Tom. Some offered old photos. Some gave written support. One woman named Nora said the HOA had fined her for painting her door the wrong color. Another man had been told to cut down a tree in his yard even though it was healthy. They were tired of the control and admired Tom for standing up. Tom listened to their stories and realized that his fight was not only for himself. It was for everyone who had been bullied by the board's power. That thought gave him even more strength. Greg continued to gather documents. He discovered that the HOA had also taken over a small public parking lot near the lake and started charging fees for it. That land, too, did not belong to them. It was government property meant for public use. Greg made copies of those records and smiled. "This will help us later," he said. When the second hearing arrived, the courtroom was more crowded. Some local residents had come to watch. Tom felt nervous but proud. Greg presented more evidence, including the witness statement from Henry and the old maps. The judge listened carefully and asked several questions to both sides. The HOA lawyer tried to argue that the new boundary map showed the road within their zone, but Greg pointed out that the new map had been drawn only 2 months before the wall was built. It was not official and had no approval from the county office. The judge seemed displeased with the HOA's explanation. He ordered both parties to submit all remaining documents before the next hearing. After the session ended, Tom stepped outside and felt the cool air on his face. Henry and Nora were waiting for him. They shook his hand and told him to stay strong. He thanked them with a smile. That evening, when Tom returned home, he sat by his window and thought about everything that had happened. He missed his cabin deeply. He could almost imagine the smell of pine wood and the soft sound of the lake. He promised himself that he would not stop until he stood there again. The next morning, Greg called him with new information. The county land officer confirmed that the HOA built part of that wall on your property. They crossed your line by 15 feet. That gives us a solid case. Tom felt relief spread through his chest. That is good news. What happens next? He asked. Greg replied, "We prepare for the final hearing. If the judge rules in our favor, they will have to remove the wall and may have to pay damages. We might even be able to claim something more." "What do you mean by something more?" Tom asked. Greg chuckled softly. "They used your land and blocked public property too. We can ask the court to transfer the parking lot rights to you as part of the settlement. It will be a strong message that people cannot take what is not theirs." Tom was silent for a moment, thinking about it. He had never imagined owning that parking lot, but the idea felt like justice. As the sun went down, he walked outside and looked toward the dark forest in the distance. The road was still blocked, but for the first time in months he felt hope. The fight was not over, but he was no longer standing alone. The truth and the law were with him now, and the next hearing would decide everything. The morning sun shone through the curtains of Tom's small house. He woke up early, feeling both anxious and hopeful. The final court hearing was only a few days away. The lawsuit had become more than just a personal fight. It had turned into a symbol of fairness for many people who lived under the strict rules of the Pinewood Lake HOA. Tom had received many letters of support from local residents. Some left small notes at his door thanking him for standing up against the board. Others offered him old photographs and documents to help his case. It touched his heart to see so many people believing in him. Greg, his lawyer, came to visit that morning with a folder full of papers. They sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee while going through each document. "I spoke with the county surveyor," Greg said. "He confirmed again that the road belongs to you. The HOA crossed your property line when they built that wall. The county will also send an officer to testify in court." Tom nodded. "That will help us." "Do you think we can win?" Greg smiled slightly. "We have a strong case. The HOA cannot hide behind false maps anymore. We just need to stay calm and let the facts speak." Tom felt a mix of relief and nervousness. The thought of facing the HOA board again made his stomach tighten. He remembered Linda's cold face during the previous hearing. She had looked at him like he was the problem, not the victim. While Tom and Greg prepared for the case, the HOA held another meeting in their office. Linda sat at the head of the table, looking angry. Several board members looked uncomfortable. "This man is making us look bad," Linda said. "People are talking. The newspaper keeps printing stories about his case. It makes the board look unfair." One of the members, Mark, cleared his throat. "Maybe because we were unfair. We built that wall without checking the line. The lawyer told us to take it down, but we refused. Now the court will decide, and it may not end well." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Are you taking his side now?" Mark shook his head. "No, I just think we made a mistake. Maybe we should try to settle before we lose more." Another member added, "People in the neighborhood are unhappy. They think the board is using money for personal projects instead of helping them." Linda stood up sharply. "Enough, we will not back down. If we lose, then we will deal with the result later. For now we fight." The room fell silent. Some members looked away, unwilling to meet her eyes. They were afraid of her leadership, but also tired of her pride. A few days later, the courtroom was filled again. Reporters, residents, and even a few curious passers-by came to watch. The story had grown popular because it showed a single man standing up to a powerful group. Tom sat beside Greg, his hands resting on the table. He tried to keep calm as the judge entered the room. The HOA lawyer, dressed in a dark suit, stood beside Linda and the other board members. Greg began the session by calling the county surveyor as a witness. The surveyor placed a large map on the stand, showing the exact property lines. With a pointer, he marked the area where the HOA's wall stood. "This part here," the surveyor said clearly, "is owned by Mr. Thomas. The wall crosses 15 feet into his property. The HOA's construction is illegal under county law." The judge looked at the map and nodded. "Understood." Then Greg presented the written statement from Henry, the old resident who remembered the road being used long before the HOA existed. The judge read the statement carefully. The HOA lawyer tried to argue that the new boundary map approved by the HOA showed the area under their control. But when the judge asked for the official approval document from the county, the lawyer could not provide it. "This map," the judge said, holding it up, "is not recognized by any legal authority. It cannot be used as proof of ownership." Linda's face turned pale. She tried to speak, but the judge raised his hand to silence her. Greg continued, "Your Honor, the HOA not only blocked my client's road, but also built the wall without permission and claimed public land near the lake as their own parking area. These actions show clear misuse of power." The HOA lawyer objected, saying that the parking lot issue was unrelated to this case. But Greg had prepared well. He pulled out another document signed by the county showing that the parking lot was originally meant for public access to the lake. "Your Honor," Greg said, "this document proves that the HOA took over property that did not belong to them. They started charging residents and visitors for parking. The money did not go to community improvement but into a private account controlled by the board." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Even the judge looked surprised. He asked both sides to present all financial records related to the parking lot within 1 week. After the hearing ended, reporters surrounded Tom outside the courthouse. He felt shy but spoke politely. "I only want what is fair. I did not start this fight to harm anyone. I just want to reach my cabin again and see justice done." Many people clapped for him. Some even called him a hero, but Tom only smiled modestly and thanked them. That evening, the HOA board office was in chaos. Members argued loudly. Several demanded that Linda resign before things got worse. She refused. "I will not leave because of one stubborn man," she said angrily. Mark shook his head. He is not stubborn. He is right. We were wrong, and now everyone knows it. The argument ended with several members walking out of the room. The unity of the board had started to break. Over the next week, Greg received copies of the HOA's bank statements through the court order. When he reviewed them, he found that thousands of dollars from parking lot fees had been moved into a private account under Linda's name. He immediately shared the evidence with the judge and the county officer. The situation changed completely. What had started as a simple land dispute now turned into a case of fraud and misuse of community funds. The judge ordered a full audit of the HOA's activities. News channels began covering the story. People across the county started paying attention. Tom felt overwhelmed by how big the case had become. He had never wanted a scandal, only fairness. But now it was too late to turn back. The truth had to come out. A week later, the final hearing was scheduled. The courtroom was packed. Linda looked tired and angry while her lawyer appeared nervous. Greg presented the new evidence calmly. The HOA not only blocked my client's private road but also used false maps and misused community funds. These actions harmed both my client and the residents who trusted the board. The judge listened quietly. When it was the HOA's turn to speak, their lawyer had little to say. Linda tried to defend herself, but the judge interrupted her and asked directly, "Did you use HOA funds for personal use?" Linda did not answer at first. After a long pause, she said, "I manage the funds for the good of the community." The judge frowned. "That is not the question. Did you use them for personal use?" She stayed silent. The courtroom was completely still. The judge then closed the session and said that the final verdict would be given in 1 week. When Tom left the courthouse that day, the crowd outside cheered for him. He thanked everyone and looked up at the clear sky. The fight had been long and stressful, but he felt proud. He knew that justice was close. The next hearing would decide everything, not only for him but for everyone who had been treated unfairly by the HOA. The morning of the verdict came with a soft breeze across the small town. Everyone seemed to know what day it was. The courthouse parking lot filled quickly with cars. Some people brought signs of support for Tom, while others came simply to see how the story would end. The newspapers and local news channels had covered every step of the case, turning it into one of the most talked about legal fights in the county. Tom arrived early, wearing a clean shirt and carrying a small folder of documents, even though Greg had told him he would not need them today. His hands felt slightly cold, but his heart was steady. He had done everything he could. Now, all that remained was to hear what the judge would say. Greg met him outside the courtroom and gave him a reassuring nod. "You did well, Tom. No matter what happens today, you stood up for what was right. That matters more than anything." Tom smiled faintly. "I just want my road back, Greg, that is all." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was serious and quiet. The judge sat in his chair reading through several papers. On the other side of the room sat Linda, the HOA president, her lawyer beside her, and 2 remaining board members. Many others had resigned after the last hearing, afraid of being part of the growing scandal. When the judge finally raised his head, the room went silent. "This case," he began, "involves not only a property dispute, but also the responsibility of an organization that was trusted to act for the good of a community." After careful review of the evidence and testimony, the court is ready to give its decision. Tom's heartbeat slowed, and he took a deep breath. The judge looked directly at Linda. "The court finds that the Pinewood Lake HOA constructed a barrier that crossed onto private land owned by Mr. Thomas. The action was taken without legal permission and in direct violation of county property laws." A few people in the courtroom gasped quietly. "The HOA is ordered to remove the metal wall and all related structures immediately," the judge continued. "They must also restore access to Mr. Thomas's road and pay compensation for damages caused by the obstruction." Tom's eyes brightened and he gripped the edge of the table. But the judge was not done yet. "In addition," the judge said, turning a page, "the court has reviewed financial documents showing that funds collected from the Pinewood Lake parking lot were used for personal expenses by members of the HOA board. These actions constitute misuse of community funds. Therefore, the management of the parking lot will be transferred under temporary supervision to the county office until a new community structure is chosen." He paused, then added, Mr. Thomas's legal team has requested that ownership of the parking lot rights be granted to him as compensation for the illegal use of his land. Considering the evidence and the extent of the harm caused, this request is approved. The rights to operate the parking lot are hereby transferred to Mr. Thomas. The room filled with murmurs of surprise and applause. The decision was final. Linda's face went pale. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she stayed frozen, staring straight ahead. The judge turned to her once more. The HOA board, under your leadership, violated property boundaries, misused funds, and acted without transparency. The court orders a full audit of all HOA financial activity for the past 3 years. Until then, you are suspended from your position. The bailiff asked everyone to remain quiet as the judge signed the final papers. The sound of his pen seemed to echo in the room. When he finished, he said, "This case is now closed." Greg turned to Tom and gave him a firm handshake. "You did it," he said proudly. "You stood your ground and won." Tom felt a wave of relief rush over him. His shoulders relaxed for the first time in months. "I cannot believe it," he said softly. "It is finally over." People around them clapped and congratulated him. Reporters tried to ask questions, but Greg told them politely that they would make a statement later. Outside the courthouse, the sun shone brightly, and a cool wind passed through the trees. Tom stood there, breathing deeply. He had fought against a powerful group and won not only his road, but also justice for many others who had been treated unfairly. Later that afternoon, the news spread quickly through Pinewood Lake. Residents cheered at the decision. Some even gathered outside the old HOA office, calling for new leadership. For the first time in years, they felt free from fear of strict and unfair control. Linda quietly packed her things and left the building that evening. No one stopped her. The once powerful board had collapsed under its own greed and pride. The following week, workers arrived at the metal wall. Tom watched as they cut through the steel and removed the sharp spikes. The sound of the machinery echoed through the forest. Piece by piece, the wall that had trapped his peace came down. When the last section fell, Tom stepped forward and looked at the open road leading to his cabin. For a moment, he just stood there, remembering the first day he saw the wall and how hopeless he had felt. Now the path was clear again. Greg joined him, holding a cup of coffee. "Looks good, doesn't it?" he said. Tom smiled. "Better than good. It feels like freedom." They walked up the dirt road together until the cabin came into view. The small wooden house looked the same as before, quiet and strong under the sunlight. The grass had grown long and dust covered the porch, but it still felt like home. Tom spent the next few days cleaning the cabin. He swept the floor, fixed the windows, and cut the overgrown grass. He repaired the small fence near the lake and polished the wooden table inside. The place came back to life little by little. In the evenings, he sat outside watching the water shimmer under the moonlight. He finally had his peace back. A few weeks later, the county officially handed him the rights to manage the parking lot near the lake. Greg helped him complete the paperwork. Tom decided to keep the parking free for local residents and use a small part of the income from visitors to maintain the road and the lake area. People respected his honesty. They trusted him more than they ever trusted the HOA. The same residents who had once paid unnecessary fees now smiled whenever they met him. Some brought small gifts like homemade bread or fresh fruit to thank him. Tom never acted like a hero, but in the eyes of many, he became one. He had proved that one person could stand against a group and still win through patience, truth, and courage. One afternoon, as he sat outside his cabin drinking tea, Henry stopped by. The old man smiled and said, "You did it, son. You made them pay for what they did." Tom laughed softly. "I just wanted my cabin back. The rest happened on its own." Henry looked around at the peaceful lake and nodded. Sometimes doing the right thing brings more good than we can see at first. As the sun began to set, Tom looked down the road that was once blocked by spikes. It was now open and quiet, with birds flying above and the wind brushing through the trees. He felt grateful for every moment of the long struggle because it led to this peace. He thought about all the people who had helped him, about Greg, Henry, and the many neighbors who believed in him. He promised himself that he would keep the lake clean, the road open, and the place free for everyone to enjoy. The fight had been hard, but now he had both justice and peace. The wall was gone, the fear was gone, and the truth had finally won. Months passed since the court's decision, and life around Pinewood Lake changed completely. The old metal wall was gone, the road was open, and the air around the lake felt free again. Families came to spend weekends fishing and having small picnics near the water. Children ran along the shore, and the sound of laughter replaced the silence that had covered the place for so long. Tom had turned his cabin into a small resting lodge for travelers who wanted to stay by the lake. He called it Lakeside Haven. It had only 3 rooms, but visitors loved the peaceful environment. He built a small wooden dock near the edge of the water and placed 2 benches for people to sit and enjoy the sunset. He also took care of the parking lot that now belonged to him. With Greg's help, he made a few simple improvements. They added proper signs, planted trees around the edges, and set up solar lights for safety at night. Tom used a small part of the parking fees to keep the area clean and repair the road regularly. Every morning he woke up early, opened the cabin windows, and breathed in the fresh forest air. He had never felt so content. After years of struggle, the peace that had once been stolen from him was back in full. One day, while checking the road near the entrance, Tom saw a car stopping by the gate. A woman stepped out. She looked around for a moment, then slowly walked toward him. When she came closer, he recognized her face. It was Linda, the former HOA president. For a brief second, he felt the old anger rise inside him, but it faded quickly. He had already moved past the fight. She looked tired and much older than before. Her clothes were neat but simple, and she carried a small envelope in her hand. "Tom," she said quietly, "I know I am the last person you expected to see here." He nodded slowly. "Yes, I did not expect this. What brings you here?" She sighed and looked at the open road behind him. "I came to say sorry. I know that word cannot change what I did, but I had to try. I let pride and power control me, and it destroyed everything. I lost my position, my home, and the respect of my neighbors. I have nothing left to gain by lying anymore. You were right about everything." Tom stood quietly listening. The wind blew softly through the trees, and the lake shimmered in the distance. Linda handed him the envelope. "This has a letter for the new community committee. I have written that all remaining HOA funds should be used to improve this area. I hope it helps you continue what you have started here." He took the envelope, nodded, and said, "Thank you for saying this. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I only wanted peace and fairness. What happened should never happen to any neighbor again." Linda nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "I know. I wish I had understood that earlier." She turned back to her car, and before leaving, she said softly, "You took everything the wrong people built and turned it into something good. Keep doing that." When her car disappeared down the road, Tom looked at the envelope again and placed it inside his pocket. He did not hold any anger anymore. The past was over, and this land had found balance again. Later that day, Greg arrived to check the new parking area lights. When Tom told him about Linda's visit, Greg smiled. "Sometimes people realize their mistakes too late, but it is still something. You gave her a chance to make peace." "That says a lot about you," Tom shrugged lightly. "I do not want to live with anger anymore. The lake deserves better." The days grew warmer as summer came closer. Pinewood Lake became a favorite spot for visitors. Local families organized small markets near the lot on weekends, selling handmade crafts and food. Tom gave them space for free. He believed the lake should belong to everyone. Children started calling him Uncle Tom. They would wave when they saw him fixing the dock or planting flowers. Some even helped him clean up trash after picnics. The place that had once been filled with tension and fear now thrived with life and happiness. Henry, the old man who had stood by him from the start, often came to fish. He would sit beside Tom, both quietly watching the ripples on the lake. One afternoon, Henry said, "You see this peace, Tom? You earned it. When you fought for what was right, you didn't just win your road back. You gave the whole town its spirit again." Tom smiled and said, "It was worth every long night and every worry." Henry nodded. "And now look around. This place is alive again. That is the best reward." Weeks later, the new community committee invited Tom to a town meeting. They wanted to discuss future plans for Pinewood Lake. When Tom arrived, he was surprised to see how different things felt. There was no shouting, no arrogance, and no secret deals. Everyone listened respectfully. The committee chair, a kind woman named Maria, stood and said, "We want to thank Tom for showing us what real community means. He reminded us that we are not here to rule each other but to care for our shared land. Because of him, we are planning to expand the walking trail and protect the forest around the lake. Everyone clapped, and Tom felt shy but grateful. He never wanted attention, but seeing people finally united made him proud. That evening, after returning to his cabin, he walked down to the water. The sky was painted with soft colors of pink and orange. He sat on the bench near the dock, listening to the gentle sound of the waves touching the wood. He thought about how far things had come. The lawsuit, the anger, the fear, the courtrooms, the long nights of doubt, they were all part of the path that led to this moment. He understood now that sometimes peace is not given but earned through patience and courage. He looked at the open road, the trees glowing under the fading sunlight, and the families laughing near the water. It was all alive because he did not give up. As night approached, Greg came by carrying 2 cups of tea. He sat beside Tom and said, "The town wants to name the road after you. They think it is a good way to remember what happened." Tom laughed lightly. "That is not necessary. Let it just be the Lake Road. It belongs to everyone now." Greg smiled. "That sounds like you. Always humble." They sat together in silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky. The soft glow reflected on the lake's surface, creating a peaceful scene that felt timeless. From that day onward, Pinewood Lake became known not only for its beauty but also for its story, a story of fairness, courage, and one man's refusal to be silenced by power. Travelers who came to stay at Tom's lodge often heard the tale and left inspired. Years later, people still spoke of how a simple man had taken on a powerful group and changed everything. The road stayed open, the lake stayed free, and the small wooden cabin remained a symbol of honesty and hope. Tom never sought fame or wealth. His reward was simple: to wake each morning to the calm sound of nature, to see children playing by the water, and to know that his fight had made life better for others. As he looked at the peaceful lake one last time before going inside, he whispered a quiet promise to himself that he would always protect this place no matter what. And with that, the story of a man who stood alone against injustice became a lasting part of Pinewood Lake's history. The walls were gone forever, and in their place stood open skies, free paths, and the calm strength of a man who never gave up.